Hi, this is Ofori, the digital reader, and these are the books I bought and the books I read in the month of January. Surprisingly, I only bought one book this month, which is pretty low for me. Looking back over the last couple years, I think there have only been maybe three other times where I ended up buying just one book in an entire month. Normally, I average about three books a month, so it really stood out to me. There's no real significance to it. I was just generally surprised when I noticed it. For January and February, I've decided to focus mostly on Kindle Unlimited. I want to catch up on some of the books that are locked in Amazon's ecosystem and only available through Kindle Unlimited. Anytime I read a book through Kindle Unlimited, I'll add a little tag so you know it wasn't a purchase, just a rental. I got a 3-month deal on Kindle Unlimited at 99 cents a month, so I'll probably stick with it through February. Hopefully, that'll give me enough time to catch up on several books I've wanted to read stuck on Amazon. After that, I'll dive back into my personal library. So, with all that said, here's the one book I bought in January: Blood Over Brighthaven, a novel by M.L. Wang. For 20 years, Siona has devoted every waking moment to the study of magic, fueled by a mad desire to achieve the impossible, to be the first woman ever admitted to the high magistry of the University of Magics and Industry. When Siona finally passes the qualifying exam and becomes a high mage, she finds her challenges have just begun. Her new colleagues are determined to make her feel unwelcome, and instead of a qualified lab assistant, they give her a janitor. What neither Siona nor her peers realize is that her taciturn assistant was not always a janitor. 10 years ago, he was a nomadic hunter who lost his family on their perilous journey from the wild plains to the city. But now he sees the opportunity to understand the forces that decimated his tribe, drove him from his homeland, and keep the privileged in power. At first, mage and outsider have a fractious relationship, but working together, they uncover an ancient secret that could change the course of magic forever, if it doesn't get them killed first. And here are the books I read during the month of January. Sword and Thistle by S.L. Rowland. Taking quests, exploring ruins, and camping under the stars. For Dobbin Thornhill, there's no better life than an adventurer's, especially with a reputation like his. His latest task? Retrieving the rare and mystical dragonfire mushroom for one of Eastbourne's secret societies. To find it, Dobbin must venture deep into Hell's Crag, a dragon-ruined city still haunted by restless spirits centuries after the attack. The dangers are great, but the reward is tempting enough to shoulder the risk one more time. While Dobbin's past has led to a life of solo adventures, some jobs can't be done alone. For him, letting others in isn't just about survival. It's about facing the ghosts of his past and finding strength in the unlikeliest of allies. In the land of shadows, trust might be his most pivotal gamble of all. Sword and Thistle by S.L. Rowland is another fantastic example of cozy fantasy done right. I've realized that while I do enjoy action, the number one reason cozy fantasy really appeals to me as a reader comes from my background in role-playing games. I've played RPGs for more than half my life, and honestly, some of the most fun I ever had wasn't during the fights, it was the downtime. It was everything the game master let you do when you weren't in combat. Improving skills, developing a build, starting a business, finding romance, and just figuring out who your character was between adventures. In an actual game, there's rarely enough time to dig into all of that. With 5 to 7 players at the table, the focus usually shifts back to dungeons and combat because everyone wants their moment. Reading cozy fantasy feels like reading that downtime made into a story. It's where characters are fully fleshed out, where you really get to sit with who they are and what they want. That's exactly what Sword and Thistle delivers. Most of the book focuses on the journey to the adventure, the preparation, the moments in between. The actual combat and adventure elements are brief and not deeply emphasized, but that's the point. Cozy fantasy isn't about nonstop action. It's about travel, preparation, and all the quiet, meaningful moments that happen when swords are sheathed. I'm really loving S.L. Rowland's work so far. Between Cursed Cocktails and now Sword and Thistle, there's something about that focus on the everyday rhythm of an adventurous life that completely fascinates me. This was a great book. I gave it 5 stars. The Halfling's Harvest by S.L. Rowland. For most halflings, the annual Harvest Festival is a time to revel in life's simple pleasures: hearty feasts, flowing wine, and warm hospitality. But for Marigold Bramblefoot, owner of the Dewdrop Inn and Vineyard, It's the busiest and most stressful time of the year. Juggling an inn full of quirky guests, preparing for the bustling festivities, and managing her vineyard would be enough to overwhelm anyone. But Marigold has her sights set on something bigger, winning first place in the annual wine competition and finally stepping out of her father's shadow. The only problem? Her rival, Darkroot Cellars, has dominated the competition for a decade thanks to the druidic magic behind their wines. With her hands full and her heart set on success, Marigold must balance the chaos of the festival, a budding romance, and unraveling the vineyard's hidden mysteries, all while discovering what it truly means to craft her own legacy. Because in Willowbrook, the Harvest Festival is more than a celebration. It's a season for transformation, and Marigold's is long overdue. I really enjoyed the Halfling's Harvest, but it didn't hit quite as hard for me as S.L. Rowland's first two books. The main reason is that the main character isn't an adventurer. She's literally a winemaker and an innkeeper. And honestly, this is the kind of book I never would have expected to get pulled into. On paper, a story about a winemaker innkeeper sounds like something I'd assume would be boring. Nothing flashy, nothing intense, just day-to-day life. But what Roman does with that setup is impressive. This could have easily been a 2 or 3 star why am I reading this kind of book where nothing exciting happens. Instead, it ends up being a solid 4-star read. Yes, there's no big action, no dramatic stakes, but I still found myself enjoying it and wanting to keep reading. I didn't connect with it as strongly because I personally like cozy fantasy that still has a sense of adventure or at least a looming threat, and this book has basically zero of that. Even so, Rowland does a great job making it engaging purely through character and atmosphere. The characters here are interesting enough to carry the story even if they aren't completely my personal jam. I'd absolutely recommend this to readers who want a fantasy story without a lot of sex, violence, or shock value. It's a great choice also, I think, for younger readers dipping their toes into fantasy or for anyone who wants something calm, comforting, and character-focused. There is a romance between 2 women, so that's something to be aware of. Other than that, it's very non-spicy, very cozy, and very easy to recommend. I give it 4 stars. Welcome to Pacific City by Andrew Leon Hudson, Matthew Hughes, Tansy Rayner Roberts, Igor Ljubuncic, Wilson Geiger, P.J. Richards, Victor Espinosa, Daniel Ausema, Lydia Hall, and Jennifer Baumer. Welcome to Pacific City, a home for a range of heroic and villainous characters to rival Gotham or Metropolis. Here you'll find origin stories, thrills and spills, psychos and saviors, laughs and lamentations. Headlined by crowd-pleasing genre authors Matthew Hughes and Tansy Rayner Roberts, and joined by 13 new and established writers from around the world, our contributors are defining Pacific City one story at a time. Welcome to Pacific City is the answer to the question, where do you go in quaint, quiet little hamlets like Tokyo, London, Mumbai, and NYC just don't give you a tingle anymore? Come and see what it has to offer. Welcome to Pacific City was honestly kind of a disappointment. It's pitched as an anthology set in Pacific City, a world that's supposedly thriving with superheroes. That's the hook, that was the assignment. And it really feels like most of the writers either didn't get the assignment or decided they were too cool to follow it. Out of the entire book, there are only 2 stories I generally call superhero stories. Most of the rest try to be clever by focusing on regular people who live in Pacific City, doing things that aren't particularly superhero related at all. A lot of it reads more like a generic science fiction anthology than anything connected to a superhero universe. If that had been the pitch, I might have been more forgiving, but it wasn't. The disappointment might have been easier to swallow if the stories themselves were great, but most of them were pretty mediocre. They felt like standard sci-fi magazine fare. Technically competent, but flat and forgettable. There's a strong sense that many of these writers are comfortable in short fiction, but struggle to make a story really land or say something meaningful. If you're going to ignore the assignment, you have to at least deliver something exceptional. That didn't really happen here. To be fair, there were a few bright spots. I'd say there are maybe 3 good stories total. 2 of those are actually involving superheroes, but one doesn't. No. To be fair, there are a few bright spots. I'd say there are maybe 3 good stories total. Two of those actually involve superheroes. One doesn't, but it's still solid. Unfortunately, that's not enough to save the collection as a whole. Overall, I can't recommend this book. I wouldn't recommend it for the quality of the short stories, and I definitely wouldn't recommend it to anyone looking for superhero fiction. It feels kind of like a bait and switch. For me, this was a 2-star read. Cop Hater by Ed Mcbain. As a cop with the city's famed 87th precinct, Steve Carella has seen it all, or so he thinks, because nothing can prepare him for the sight that greets him on a sweltering July night. Fellow detective Mike Reardon's dead body splayed across the sidewalk, his face blown away by a .45. Days later, Reardon's partner is found dead, a .45 caliber bullet buried deep in his chest. Only a fool would call it a coincidence, and Carella's no fool. He chalks the whole ugly mess up to a grudge killing, until a third murder shoots that theory to hell. Armed with only a single clue, Carella delves deep into the city's underbelly, launching a grim search for answers that will lead him from a notorious brothel to the lair of a beautiful, dangerous widow. He won't stop until he finds the truth, or until the next bullet finds him. After finishing Ed Mcbain's He Who Hesitates, I did a little research and some YouTube browsing and quickly discovered that the 87th Precinct series has a huge and very dedicated fan base. That book completely blew me away, so I figured I would see what else was in the series. There are a lot of books, but unfortunately most of them are locked to Amazon. The good news is that they're available through Kindle Unlimited, so I don't actually have to buy them from Amazon, which is how I'm reading them. The first book in the series is Cop Hater, and honestly, part of me was kind of hoping it wouldn't be that good so I could just walk away and not feel obligated to keep using Kindle Unlimited for this series. But yeah, that didn't happen. Cop Hater was excellent. When I started this new reading journey and made a conscious effort to read more widely, one of the big gaps in my reading life was detective books. The few detective books I tried had left me pretty cold, bland and forgettable, and not very engaging. Ed Mcbain completely changed that for me. His characters immediately pulled me in. They're interesting, they feel real, and they're just plain cool. There's also an almost historical fiction element to the books. Since they're written in the 1950s, you get a real sense of the time period, how people talked, how they behaved, and how the world felt, at least through Ed Mcbain's eyes. I really enjoy slipping into that past and seeing it play out. This is the kind of hard-boiled detective fiction I was hoping to get from authors like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. Mcbain brings the drama, the tension, and the character work in a way that makes these books genuine page-turners. Once again, this was an excellent read. I keep going back and forth on whether it was better than He Who Hesitates, and I still think I liked He Who Hesitates more, but part of that might be the shock of how good it was when I wasn't expecting it. One last thing that blew my mind. In the preface, Mcbain mentions that it usually took him about 2 months to write one of these novels. 2 months. The fact that he could produce something this tight, engaging, and readable in that amount of time is honestly impressive. I went back and forth on the rating, but in the end, this is a solid 4-star read for me. I loved it, and I already know I'm going to keep reading the series. The recurring characters, the way the story revolves around the 87th Precinct, and the rotating focus from book to book just really works for me. Valerie StrongHold, Security for Hire by Michael Anderle and Renée Jaggér. When 3 local bullies pick on Iron Hill's dwarf, Iravel or Val StrongHold, she naturally defends herself. So why is she the only one who gets thrown out of the tavern after the brawl? On her way home, she meets 2 dragons in human form, Axel and Livius, on an errand for the Queen, and that errand involves Val. The Queen requests an immediate audience, and as it turns out, the Queen wants her body. Well, rather, she wants her fighting skills. Diplomats often need bodyguards in foreign lands, and the Queen thinks Val's skill set fits the bill. One problem. Val knows little about the world beyond Iron Hills, especially the legendary land called New York. Security for Hire was a bit of a mixed bag for me. I really liked the main character. She's well written and honestly feels different from a lot of urban fantasy heroines. Instead of being effortlessly perfect and beautiful, she has real body issues to work through, and I genuinely enjoyed watching her grow over the course of the story. Where the book struggled for me was the world building. At times, especially early on, it felt a little silly. The setting comes across like a mashup of Shrek and Men in Black. You've got fantasy creatures acting like cool high school kids, complete with cell phones, laptops, and modern slang, mixed with a hidden world setup where fantasy beings live alongside humans. When these characters cross over into the human world, they're covered by something called the glamour, which makes them look human. So it's very much that Men in Black idea of magical beings hiding in plain sight throughout the city. That said, even though I wasn't sold on the world, I cared about the main character enough that the more I read, the more I found myself enjoying the book. Watching her develop and become more confident kept me invested, even when the setting didn't fully work for me. If I did half-star ratings, this would probably have landed at a solid 3.5. But my main test, especially for books in the series, is simple. Do I want to read the sequel? If I finish a book and feel fine never picking up the next one, that's usually a 3-star read for me. If I enjoy it enough that I want to continue the series, that bumps it up to 4 stars. In this case, I like the book enough that I definitely want to read the next one. So I'm giving Security for Hire 4 stars. So to sum everything up, the books I bought Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. And for the books that I read Sword and Thistle by S.L. Rowland. I read The Halfling's Harvest by S.L. Rowland. I read Welcome to Pacific City by Andrew Leon Hudson, Matthew Hughes, Tansy Rayner Roberts, Igor Ljubuncic, Wilson Geiger, P.J. Roberts, Victor Espinosa, Daniel Ausema, Lydia Hall, and Jennifer Baumer. I read Cop Hater by Ed Mcbain. And I read Valerie StrongHold, Security for Hire by Michael Anderle and Renée Jaggér. That's everything I bought and everything I read in the month of January 2026. This is Zofori, the Digital Reader, and keep reading.